Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator, the president today at his town hall said that it is the responsibility of Congress to make sure the United States doesn't fail to pay its bills. Sounds like the president's trying to turn the pressure, turn the heat on Congress and say, if this fails, if we do not raise the government's debt ceiling, it's your fault.
Well, we're listening, and we actually will present a plan in the morning to raise the debt ceiling contingent upon significant cuts, statutory caps, and a balanced budget amendment. And I think it's good for us to show what we're for, and they need to show us what they're for, and then maybe we can find somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. That is, the president also says he wants a balanced approach. So I think rhetorically people seem to be trying to be careful here. 2 weeks to go before you hit the deadline. Somewhere in the middle. If you cannot get a balanced budget amendment, which most people believe you cannot get because the Democrats still run the United States Senate, the president of the United States doesn't want a balanced budget amendment. If you can't get that part, are you still willing to make a deal as long as you get some other things, or is that a deal breaker for you?
Well, see, I'd like to know why the president doesn't want to balance the budget or doesn't want a balanced budget amendment of the Constitution. I want to have that full-throated debate and discussion both in Congress and in the public. 75% of the public does want a balanced budget amendment, so he's in the minority, and he needs to explain to the American public, you know, why he's opposed to a balanced budget amendment. But what I perceive as coming towards the Democrats is the Democrats say the rich need to bear more of the burden. That seems to be their big mantra in the last week or so. And I would say, okay, the rich can bear more of the burden. Why don't we have the rich pay the full cost of their Medicare and have the rich take reduced Social Security benefits? That is the way the rich can absorb more of the burden. But I don't want to increase taxes, because even if you tax rich people or corporations, it really is taxing everyone, because you'll have less jobs and it'll hurt the economy. The reason tax revenue's down is that we're growing at such a slow rate. If we could grow again, if our economy could get out of the recession, we'd have plenty of revenue.
So on the tax issue, then, you have no wiggle room, because the president made the case today. He said, look what Bill Clinton did in the 1990s. He raised taxes on wealthy Americans, and the economy was booming. George W. Bush cut them, and we had a much more sluggish economy. So the current president makes the case that Bill Clinton is proof that if you have modest tax increases on the rich, it won't have that impact on job growth that many Republicans argue.
Well, about 2 weeks ago, most Republicans voted to get rid of the ethanol credit. We've shown that we're willing to get rid of some credits and deductions, but even that should be a balanced approach. Most of us think that you would lower overall rates and get rid of deductions, you would have an enormous boom. You know, when President Reagan was here and they lowered rates to 28%, he had 6% growth in 1 year, and he actually had more revenue. When tax rates were at 90%, you brought in about 18% of GDP in revenue. When tax rates were 28%, you brought in 18%. I don't think increasing rates will bring in more revenue. You need to bring in more revenue by growing the economy. We're in this horrible recession, and that's why we don't have revenue coming in.
And so I want to be as clear as we can be for anybody watching out there as we head into the final 2 weeks. Senator Rand Paul says you're open to more revenues if they come from closing loopholes, but you're not going to touch anything that raises rates.
Well, rates can't go up, and I would say that even closing loopholes needs to be done in conjunction with actually lowering rates so you spur the economy. But I would say the area where I think we could compromise, if the Democrats are insistent that rich bear more of the burden, let's do it on the benefit side, not on the tax side, and we basically can get to the same goal and find a compromise by saying, look, rich people should pay more of the cost of their Medicare, and rich people probably will have to settle for less benefits from Social Security. That would fix a lot of the problem.
And do you see your leadership willing to make that position, or as you criticize some of the president's position, or some Republican leaders, whether it be Leader McConnell on the Senate side or Speaker Boehner on the House side, or some of them opposed to what you're talking about there, especially Medicare and Social Security, you know, the third rails touching the entitlements of American politics? Is your leadership being too timid?
No, I think if we work together, I think all Republicans are willing to do it. Unfortunately, see, the other side is not coming to us. They've been putting ads on TV saying we're going to push grandma off a cliff, and as long as they keep it at that level, we're going to have a divided country and get nowhere.
I want to read you something the New York Times columnist David Brooks wrote the other day. He said, if the Republican Party were a normal party, it would take advantage of this amazing moment. It is being offered the deal of the century, trillions of dollars in spending cuts in exchange for a few $100 million of revenue increases. David Brooks going on to say that if somehow all of this collapses, it is you, the Republicans, who will be blamed. Is he right?
I think part of the problem is they're talking about $2 trillion in spending cuts, but over a 10 to 15-year period. You know, we can't bind future Congresses, so there's no guarantee that any of those cuts ever occur. You know, Larry Lindsey had an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day, and he said if interest rates go up 2 points, you'll have $5 trillion extra in spending on interest. If you look at the exploding charts on spending and debt, it's going to be driven by interest in the next 10 years. So I don't think we can count on and trust Congress to do what they say they're going to do for 10 years. I don't personally trust the body of Congress to do what they say or any of their promises. That's why I would only trust it if we actually amended the Constitution to say you have to balance your budget.
We'll watch how this plays out over the big next 2 weeks. Senator Rand Paul, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Just ahead, Marcia